What is the crack, everyone? It's Nathan here, aka the Rambling Kern and head instructor of Kern School of Combat. So today's video comes from one of my viewers who reached out to me to ask some questions about lead-loaded shillelaghs and what to look for when buying shillelaghs. So I thought this is a pretty interesting video topic to bring up to you guys. And if any of you guys are ever interested in any certain topics around Irish history or Irish martial arts, feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to cover them in a video. So the question was basically a person who was living in a part of the world where they didn't have access to Irish stick fighting classes and didn't really know much about shillelaghs, and they weren't sure what to do when buying a shillelagh. So very quick overview of how shillelaghs are made. This is the root of the shillelagh, so they grow like this in the ground. This is the branch, and often this is just chopped off, shaped, and then flip it around. That's your head of your walking stick, and you walk with this. Not always, sometimes it's a branch, so imagine a larger branch and this is coming off of it, but generally that's how it's done. Now when it comes to the finish on these, generally you'll find two types of finishes. One is like this, so you see here it's kind of an oiled finish. This is less robust for wear and tear when it comes to weather. It's more robust for wear and tear when it comes to fighting. So as you can see here, hopefully with the head of this, there's a lot of little dings and marks on it. It's because it's been used for various different impacts, hitting things over the years. Now what I can do with this is sand this down, re-oil it, and it's absolutely fine. Now with a walking stick, often these are lacquered or varnished, and this basically seals the stick in, keeps it safe from the elements. So for example, if you live somewhere that's very dry or very hot, or your weather's very changeable, very useful thing because it avoids the stick cracking and splitting, which obviously we don't want to happen. These sticks are more susceptible to that. However, with that sort of a varnished lacquered finish, it's more likely that they will chip if you have repeated impacts on them. Now I'll touch on which one to go for in a minute. But with these sort of sticks, often the question will arise then of, well, what is the difference really between a fighting and a walking stick? Really it comes down to the feel in the hand, and this is not something that you can get across very easily, but it's quite simple to explain. Basically, a fighting stick tends to, not always, tends to be a little bit more forward heavy, as in it wants to kind of tip forward in this upper half, where the walking stick, generally when you swing it, the bottom of it wants to go out in front as you walk. And it won't feel quite the same when you're trying to walk with a fighting stick. That's a kind of a general rule of thumb, not always true, but generally that's kind of how sticks are divided out by makers I've talked to. Now, obviously, then the question arose of should or shouldn't this person buy a lead-loaded stick? So, in my opinion, no, you should not buy a lead-loaded stick. And I'm going to explain why over a few different points. So first off, how is a lead-loaded shillelagh made? I'm going to take some pictures from the wonderful channel Sticks and Stones, a really talented maker. He makes all sorts of really cool stuff. Really recommend you go check out his work. Also makes a load of lead-loaded shillelaghs and shows you the process. Really cool stuff. So basically, there's two different ways I've seen done. Both are basically the exact same, just kind of reverses of the process. So one is you drill a hole through the front of the knob here, you fill it with molten lead, you put in a wooden plug, and then you sand it over until you can't see anything. Or you do the reverse, where you put it in the back of the head of the shillelagh. Now, I'm going to touch on a few reasons as to why I think you shouldn't do this, but number one, first and foremost, the reason why I think you shouldn't do this is because for 99% of the people out there, these are walking sticks. I use my sticks for hiking, and any additional weight when hiking is not needed. It's just going to drag me down and make my life more difficult. So you do not need a lead-loaded walking stick. It's kind of counterintuitive and completely goes against why you want a walking stick. You want something light that helps you to move, not something heavy that drags you down. Simple as that. So realistically, it's not really something you need for a day-to-day use. It's like 90% of us, if not more, will never really get into an altercation, a violent altercation. Hopefully you never will. And it's probably even less so that you'll get into it with a stick. And you're probably going to pick the lighter, more nimble, more comfortable stick than you will the big, heavy one. Now that's my personal preference, but I'm quite a big guy, and I generally prefer a lighter, more nimble stick when I'm walking. I just find it far more comfortable. Point two. So for point two, this is my own personal reason. As a martial artist, I think a lead-loaded shillelagh is a terrible idea. It is way too forward heavy. You're adding additional weight onto an already forward weighted weapon. I've done various different videos on clubs. You do not want an overly heavy club. What you want from a club weapon is to hit first and hit fast. That is what you want from these. They're made from hardwood. You do not need to add extra weight. You want to be the person who hits first, and that's what makes a good club. If you add additional weight, you will overswing. You'll not be able to control the shillelagh. You'll expose your arm, your hand, and your head, and all the targets you want to keep safe. Lead loading shillelagh for martial arts reasons is really not necessary in my opinion. It adds additional weight and makes it more difficult to use, which is completely counterintuitive to the things you want from a fighting stick. You want a fighting stick that is fast, it is nimble, and it is effective. And adding additional weight to it does not do that. So if you haven't, please do like and subscribe. If you're interested in lessons in Irish stick fighting, you'll find links in the description to my classes that run weekly in South Dublin. If you live abroad or would like to sponsor my work, or are just interested in a really amazing community of people, you'll find links to my Patreon, where we have our group Discord, and also the opportunity to train with me online if that interests you. It costs as little as the cost of a cup of coffee, and it goes up from there depending on what interests you. Point number 3. You do not see historical examples of lead-loaded shillelaghs. Plain and simple. If you look at any artistic renditions of people using shillelaghs, be it faction fighters at faction fights, the few manuals we have and pictures we have of people actually using them, as well as pictures of stick makers, you will not see large heavy sticks, and you will not see lead-loaded sticks. I have only seen 2 examples of historic lead-loaded shillelaghs, and they are not used in the way that you would think. So the first one I have seen is basically the back of the stick here seems to have rotted away a bit, and the person seems to have plugged the hole with lead in order to preserve the stick. The second example, basically they'd carved a cross in the front of the head here and filled that with lead, really is ornamentation. Neither of those are adding weight to forward swing and increase weight to the stick. So ultimately, historically, you do not see this. That brings me to point number 4. Basically, you see this in modern times. This is a modern trend, and it is not a historical trend. This comes from a very popular uptake in shillelaghs being sold to the foreign market as souvenirs. They are often sold as unfinished items, basically unfinished shillelaghs with large hammer-like heads, or just overly big clunky sticks, usually basically made to sit up on a mantelpiece. It means the craftsman has a lot less work to do, a lot less effort goes into making the stick. It takes a lot less time to just chop up a branch, throw a bit of varnish on it and sell it to someone than it does to actually shape a walking stick and make it comfortable in the hand. So that is something generally that you then see, is these unfinished sticks being sold to people. Now the thing with these is these actually come from really 2 major areas. One being that you see these in early kind of 19th century and early 20th century depictions of Irish people. Basically derogatory and, somewhat offensive drawings of Irish people from the period. For example, the various different Punch cartoons that were made. These often show Irish people using big massive shillelaghs and big clubs and kind of portray them as apes and devils and all sorts of things. That's a topic of its own video that I will eventually get to one day, I'm sure. But often these sticks are portrayed this way to kind of push an image of savagery and brutish nature of the Irish people. So often the sticks are portrayed this way, and then this just gets passed down, and sticks are just assumed to be this way because it's what people basically see in popular media. Then you move that forward, and what people then see in popular media, such as the ever famous shillelagh that we see in gangs in New York, are these huge, large examples of massive big clubs, because it looks great for a protagonist to have a huge, massive club because they look, big, strong, and burly, swinging this massive thing around, and it looks far more intimidating than a light and nimble walking stick. And even this is a fairly large example of a club compared to what you would see historically. And I think this trend then continues on down into the modern era, where basically lead-loaded shillelaghs have become popular. It's become a popular term and popular search term. So now people hear this thing of, oh wow, lead-loaded shillelaghs, that must be so much more dangerous than the regular ones and so much more mysterious and interesting, so I gotta go buy one of those. So people do. And I'm going to link in the description to My coach and head coach of Antrim Bada, Maxime, he has a wonderful article all about the history of Shillelaghs and how heavy they were and were not. So if you're interested in a more in-depth overview of that, really recommend you go check out his work. And that brings you on to point number 5. So if you're using a lead-loaded stick for self-defense, you are going to get yourself into a fair bit of trouble depending on the laws where you are in the world. Plain and simple. A standard walking stick, if you're out with one, it's generally not going to raise suspicion. If you get into an altercation and you hit someone with a stick that has been modified for offensive purposes, depending on where you are in the world, that could land you in a lot of hot water. Especially in Ireland with the laws that we have, if I'm walking around with a shillelagh and hit someone, it could be a bit of trouble. But if I have one that's lead loaded, it's definitely going to cause some trouble. Very simple example that I give when I talk to people about this. If I had a baseball bat in my car and I play baseball, no one's really going to view it very negatively if an altercation breaks out and you know, something happens. However, if I have a baseball bat in the back of my car and it's got nails sticking out of it, it's no longer going to be used for baseball. It's going to be used for something else. Very much the same thing with these. And you can argue that, yeah, you know, a good craftsman, you won't be able to tell the difference. But do you want to run into that minefield? Now, obviously, this is just something to think about, but it's definitely a concern for some people depending on where you are in the world. All right, and that brings us down to our final point, point number 6. The structural integrity of our shillelagh. Anytime you put a hole into a piece of wood, you are potentially damaging its structural integrity. Now, sure, you are filling that with lead, so it may well strengthen the shillelagh somewhat, but I've done a lot of woodworking over the years. Anytime you're putting a hole or a cavity into a piece of wood, you are potentially risking damaging its overall structural integrity, especially if you're beating it. It could potentially split it or crack it open. Now, as this person rightly asked in their follow-up email, have I tested this out? No, I have not. I have run a very small and not overly successful YouTube channel. I have not had the opportunity to destructive test a number of shillelaghs over the years, never mind lead load ones. If you're willing to send me some to test, feel free, but I'm not there quite yet, so maybe in the future. But from my own experience and from my own woodworking, and there will be some interesting woodworking projects coming in the near future, so if you're interested in those, you know, stay tuned. But from my own experience, it's not something necessarily you want to do. So definitely something to consider if that's what you're going for with a shillelagh. So ultimately, when it comes to picking the shillelagh that you want, pick what you want. You know, I'm not your boss. Pick what you think is cool, pick what you like. For a lot of you guys, you're just going to pick the thing that you think is cool. I know the sound of a lead-loaded shillelagh sounds awesome. You know, go for it. I'm just giving you my advice as someone who hikes with these things and is a long-time practitioner of martial arts with these. You know, if you don't want to listen to it, feel free. You know, I think lead-loaded shillelaghs are pretty cool, but I don't really see the purpose in getting one myself. I prefer just a regular old, you know, piece of wood. So what do you guys think? Are you a big fan of them? Are those something that you would like to see? Would you like to see me test them in the future? Let me know. A big thank you to the Sticks and Stones channel. Some really cool content over there. Again, link in the description. Huge thank you to my coach Maxime and his wonderful article from which some of this information and images have been taken. And just a huge thank you to you all. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do. A lot more videos on this topic coming. A lot of really interesting projects coming in the next few months. So do stay tuned for those. And of course, if you guys are interested in seeing any potential videos or any potential topics being brought up in the near future, send me an email or pop me a comment down below, and I'm more than happy to discuss them. Thank you all so very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And slán.